My name is Lillian and I was 26 years old. The night my sister ran away with her lover and left me with her seriously ill 10-year-old. Sun is carved into my memory like a wound that never fully healed. She stood in my doorway with a suitcase, eyes cold, voice sharp, while rain hammered the windows behind her. Her son Ethan was curled up on my couch, burning with fever, his small chest rattling with every breath. The doctors had already warned us his condition was serious, chronic and unpredictable. I was shaking, begging her not to go, begging her to think of her child. But she laughed, actually laughed, and said words that still echo in my head. "He's your child now." My sister sneered while I cried helplessly, my hands clutching her sleeve until she ripped it away. Then she turned, walked out with her lover, and never looked back. The door slammed, and in that moment, my life split into a before and an after. I had no idea how to raise a child, let alone a sick one. I worked long hours, barely paid my rent, and suddenly I was responsible for medications, hospital visits, school meetings, and sleepless nights spent counting breaths and praying the fever would break. Ethan would wake up screaming from pain, calling for his mother, and I would hold him, whispering lies I hoped would someday become true. I told him she'd come back. I told him everything would be okay. Sometimes he'd look at me with eyes far too old for a 10-year-old and ask, "Aunt Lillian, did I do something bad?" Each time my heart cracked a little more. The medical bills piled up fast. I sold my car, then my jewelry, then anything that wasn't nailed down. Friends drifted away when I kept canceling plans. My sister never called, not once. No money, no questions, no messages. It was as if she'd erased her son from her life entirely. At night, when Ethan finally slept, I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by pill bottles and paperwork, wondering how one person could be so cruel. I was angry, terrified, exhausted, but above all, I was determined. I refused to let him feel abandoned again. Years passed in a blur of hospitals and hope crushed and rebuilt. Ethan grew taller, thinner, stronger in ways the doctors once said might never happen. He learned to manage his illness with discipline that humbled me. He studied hard, driven by something fierce inside him, and I worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat. There were nights I cried in the shower so he wouldn't hear me. There were mornings I smiled through bone-deep exhaustion because he needed me to be strong. People told me I was throwing my life away. They said I should have called social services, should have forced my sister to take responsibility. Maybe they were right. But every time Ethan smiled at me, every time he called me Mom by accident and then blushed, I knew I'd made my choice. 17 years later, my sister suddenly reappeared like a ghost from a past life. She showed up at a family gathering dressed in expensive clothes, dripping with confidence, acting as if nothing had happened. She hugged relatives, laughed loudly, and when she finally turned to me, her eyes flicked around as if searching for someone. With a casual tone, she asked what had happened to the poor boy she'd left behind. She said it like she was asking about an old pet. My hands trembled, but I said nothing. The room felt too small, the air too thick. Then the door opened, and a tall, handsome man in a suit entered the room. His presence silenced everyone. He walked straight toward me, placed a gentle hand on my shoulder, and smiled. My sister's face turned pale. But before that moment, before the shock and the reckoning, there were years no one saw. Years of fear that Ethan wouldn't survive the winter. Years of celebrating small victories like a normal blood test or a school award. Years of him asking why his mother didn't want him and me, learning how to answer without poisoning his heart. I taught him kindness even when the world hadn't been kind to him. I taught him that abandonment didn't define his worth. And somewhere along the way, without meaning to, I stopped being just his aunt. I became his anchor. That night my sister left, I thought my life was over. I thought I'd been handed an impossible burden. But as I look back, I realize that was the night my real story began. The night I learned what love actually costs and what it can give back in return. The room froze when the tall, handsome man in a suit stepped fully into the light, and for a heartbeat no one breathed. My sister's confident smile shattered, her lips parting as color drained from her face, because she recognized him before he even spoke. This was the moment written all over the thumbnail of my life. The moment she had unknowingly walked toward for 17 long years. The man adjusted his jacket, his posture calm, controlled, powerful, and then he looked at me with warmth that grounded my shaking legs. "Aunt Lillian," he said clearly, proudly. "I'm here." Gasps rippled through the room as realization spread like wildfire. This wasn't some stranger. This wasn't a coincidence. This was Ethan, the seriously ill 10-year-old. Son my sister had abandoned had grown into a man who commanded silence. Just by standing there, my sister staggered back a step, whispering his name as if saying it might make him disappear. "That's not possible," she muttered, eyes darting between his face and mine. "What happened to the poor boy?" She had asked so casually minutes earlier, and now the answer stood in front of her, alive, strong, successful, and completely out of her control. Ethan didn't rush to her. He didn't hug her. He didn't even look angry. He looked finished. Calm in a way only someone who has already survived the worst can be. He told the room who he was, what he had achieved, how he'd built a career despite doctors once doubting he'd live past his teens. He spoke of discipline, resilience, and the woman who raised him when no one else would. Every sentence tightened around my chest until I could barely breathe. When he finally turned to my sister, his voice was steady. He repeated her words back to her, every syllable unchanged. "He's your child now." The room went silent. He explained how those words became the fuel that drove him through hospital wards, sleepless nights, and years of pain. How he learned early that family isn't who gives birth to you, but who stays when leaving would be easier. My sister tried to interrupt, tears spilling, excuses tumbling out about fear, love, desperation. Ethan listened politely, then shook his head. "You don't get to rewrite the story," he said. "You walked away." She stayed. He gestured toward me, and in that moment, every sacrifice, every tear, every fear I'd swallowed came rushing back like a wave. I felt exposed standing there, like all my private struggles had been dragged into the light. But I also felt something I'd never allowed myself to feel before: pride. Not loud, not boastful, but deep and unshakable, the kind that settles into your bones. I remembered the night my sister ran away with her lover and left me with her seriously ill 10-year-old son, remembered how I cried helplessly while she sneered, remembered how alone I felt after the door slammed shut. I had thought survival was the victory. I was wrong. Becoming something more than survival, that was the victory. My sister collapsed into a chair, sobbing now, asking if there was any way to fix what she'd broken. Ethan didn't humiliate her. He didn't raise his voice. He simply told her the truth, that some choices create distances time can't undo. He wished her peace, then turned away. And that was it. No dramatic revenge. No shouting. Just consequences, the kind that arrive quietly but stay forever. As the gathering dissolved into whispers, Ethan leaned down and hugged me. Not the polite hug of a grown man, but the tight, familiar one of the boy who once clung to me during fevers and nightmares. "You saved my life," he whispered. I wanted to tell him he saved mine too, but the words stuck in my throat. Outside, the world kept moving like nothing monumental had just happened. But I knew better. Some moments don't need witnesses to matter. Later that night, alone at home, I sat in the same kitchen where years ago I'd stared at pill bottles and unpaid bills, terrified of the future. The fear was gone. In its place was a quiet certainty that love, real love, doesn't always look heroic in the moment. Sometimes it looks like staying when someone else runs. Sometimes it looks like exhaustion, sacrifice, and choosing again every single day. My sister asked what had happened to the poor boy. The truth is, he became everything she never believed he could be, and everything I always knew he was. If this story moved you, if you believe that real strength is built in silence, and loyalty matters more than blood, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel and stay with us for more powerful stories of resilience, consequences, and unforgettable moments.